this is the last tool I'm going to mention. And again, I say there are many, and you can see that this has been going for some time, and I'm still just, sort of getting started, because there are many, many, many tools that we won't be able to cover, but this gives us a starting place. So when we're asking complex interdisciplinary questions, one of the things that we can see is that there will be domains of thinking within that complex question. So we can ask, what are the domains of thinking inherent in this complex question? Am I dealing with all the relevant domains within the question? And in our case, we might have to limit it to the significant relevant domains. And remember, I just brushed against the intellectual standards. Well, relevance and significance are two of those intellectual standards. Are we leaving out some important domains? So this is just giving you a sense of the many domains that could be in a given complex question. So let's take our main set of questions. The question, what can we do to preserve and sustain and restore the earth? If we look at this, we can see right away, well, doesn't that have a chemical dimension? Won't that have a biological dimension? Doesn't that have a botanical dimension? And what about a geological? And ecology itself is what we're focusing on. Will it have an anthropological dimension? Will it have a sociological, historical, economic? You see, it's going to have all of these dimensions, isn't it? So now let me give you an example of how this begins to look when you are applying it to a given question. So we have the elements of reasoning, remember, purpose, question, information, so forth. We're entering it questions. And this is theory of questions that goes further. Now, so let's take an example of a complex interdisciplinary question. And somebody says, well, here's our question. What can we do to save the earth? And that's a fine question as a vague general question that gets the point across that the earth needs to be saved. But we've got to unpack this if we're going to do some good thinking about the question. And we can do that, or we do that by giving details to the question. So notice I say vague question and now more precise question. That means that I'm implying that this implies that this question is not the right question. It is a more precise question from the one that we started with. That doesn't mean this is the perfect question that we need to reason through, but it's a starting place. So this question, how can we best address the enormous challenge of sustaining and enhancing the earth, its resources, and its atmosphere in order to prevent mass extinction, and so the earth can be restored to the highest levels of health for all its creatures? Now, in detailing that, what I wanted to make sure that I included was, by the way, at first I had challenge, and then I added the term enormous, because we want to see that this is a very, very large set of problems. And we've got to face that, of sustaining and enhancing. So what that means, we've got to sustain the earth, the life that we have here in terms of plants and animals that's separate from humans. We'll set them aside for a minute. Sustaining and enhancing the earth, its resources, And that means obviously anything that is on it that is useful to other creatures and of course for humans as well. Notice I said we're going to set humans aside. You may not have agreed with that, but here the question implies that the earth, the animals and plants on the earth are living here innocently. I don't think we can say that of humans, because we are the ones taking away from the other life that's here. We're the ones that are robbing them. They're not robbing us. So we want to sustain the Earth's resources, its animal and plant life, and its atmosphere. So that includes as far out as our atmosphere goes. And we see what embedded in this question is the purpose. In order to, that's our purpose, to prevent mass extinction. And so the earth can be restored to the highest level of health for all its creatures. And there I do include humans. So do you see how we begin to unpack a question? We start with something vague. And now, what do you really mean by that? Now, if this is basically what we mean by this, then we have a lot of work to do. And I've prepared for you these, some domains within the question and some of the questions within those domains, but only some of them. So remember the diagram we were looking at with all of the domains around, and I was saying, well, we would have to include this and that and that and that. Well, here are some of the domains that I have included as a starting place. Now, to address this problem, the first thing that I think that we have to realize is that it is much of the answer depends upon the scientific realm. And we have to be able to depend upon the scientists to be doing their best thinking about these problems and how to solve these problems. And notice that I'm just beginning to detail some of the questions. I'm not going to read all this to you, but I first want you to see some of the domains. I'm just going to give you an overview. So I have here scientific, ecological, chemical, which should also say scientific in front of it, because I'm just taking two of the primary domains. We would have to add the others. Then we have the ethical domain, the economic domain, the political domain, psychological, sociological, historical, religious, educational domain. And in the end, I had to just simply stop, because you see how complex this is to reason through to solve this problem, or to at least minimize it so that there isn't another mass extinction like there has been in the past. So notice just some of the questions, and now usually I'm opening here with a general question like this: what scientific information is relevant to effectively answering the question at issue? And everything under this is really going to be unpacking that. So what are some of the significant documented human activities currently affecting other species and their abilities to live and thrive within their specific ecosystems? What species populations have disappeared or are endangered? What species have so overpopulated that they create harmful ecological imbalances? For example, humans. Humans are the main, of course, the primary problem. But because of humans, there are also many other ecological imbalances. What are some significant documented human activities that are most negatively affecting the health of humans and other sentient creatures? What are the significant documented human activities most negatively affecting the Earth's atmosphere, the Earth's waterways and oceans, the Earth's air quality, the Earth's core and surface? See, I just went down through that list. But notice some of the important moves that are being made here. Notice on number 2 and down, the ones I've been reading through, what are the significant documented? I'm not saying here, what are some of the ways in which human activities most negatively affect the Earth's atmosphere? I want significant and documented ones. So that if people say, oh, so you're saying that these are some of the ways in which humans have done this and that. Well, you see, that's very different from saying, no, I'm saying this is significant and I'm saying it's documented through the evidence. In other words, that it is true. By though that term, significant, documented. And that's why I have it there. So notice how much precision I am bringing into this unpacking within the domains. What are some significant, proven, viable solutions humans can use now to limit and reverse the degradation of the Earth and to restore healthy ecological balances across the planet? And there are many. Many are emerging, and we want to highlight and we want to celebrate those. We want to work together to use those as much as possible. So one of the examples of this is, as many of you know, in the United States and other places, beavers basically became extinct because of their skins and early in our history, and they were just decimated. But the beavers were needed to keep the waterways healthy. And if you understand how a beaver works, you really see why they're essential to the development and the health of the waterways. It's easy. It's not a hard one. So some of the significant, proven, viable solutions are very easy. So just don't cut down that tree. Just don't cut it down at all. There are places still where people are just, they think of a tree as something that gets in the way. We cannot think of of trees in this way, nor animals. But you see, what are some of the significant proven solutions that humans can use now? So I mentioned rewilding, but also to restore water habitats and to restore the oceans. What can we do? What are some significant, proven, viable solutions that humans can use now to improve air quality and so forth? What are the most effective regenerative farming practices? Do you see how all of these are answerable questions? And we've got to take apart all of the question so that we know what questions are embedded in the question, because when we have those questions, now we can figure out the answer in many cases, if not most, fairly easily, because we can say, well, what are the most effective regenerative farming practices? Let us just see. Let us look at everything that we possibly can that's being done on the planet, and let us see what is best right now. That doesn't mean these practices won't improve. All right, so given current research, what appear to be the most promising scientific developments for ecological health as we move into the future? Now, notice that's a different kind of question, but it's still a scientific question because we have a lot of research going on that points ways to the future, and we want to know what those are. Then there are some chemical questions that we need to consider. What chemicals are responsible for ongoing damage, and so forth? Again, I'm not going to go through all these, but you see we have chemical questions about chemicals that we need to ask. So, for example, take the way that we tend to think about chemicals in our private homes. Now, I think we can get away with basically just a few chemicals, like in the ones that have been around for, as it were, ever, like baking soda and vinegar. And that'll clean most of the things in our house. And they're non-toxic and they're very inexpensive. But of course, the chemical companies have led us to believe that that's not sanitizing, and that's not good enough. And we need all of these other chemicals that they produce, which actually, many of them cause harm. So we have a lot of chemicals on the planet that are causing harm. We need to know what those chemicals are. What about the ethical dimension? What ethical principles should guide the way we think about our main question at issue? What ethical principles should guide the way we think? And what ethical principles have been violated through human treatment of planet Earth? In terms of the health of the Earth, what are our ethical obligations to each other, to other species, and to the future life on Earth? And how can we better meet our ethical obligations? Now, it is clear that humans have basically almost entirely ignored the ethical dimension in this domain. In any case, we get a very, very poor grade. And then we have the economic dimension. What economic variables are keeping us from achieving a healthy Earth and healthy ecosystems on the Earth? What are the main economic barriers? And these questions unpack that. What political forces stand in the way? What role does power play in this set of problems that we face? And as we know, there are tremendous political forces standing in the way. These are primary and fundamental forces. So we can have the science, we can have all of the scientific questions answered and every other relevant scientific question answered. We can answer every other thing here, every other question here, and feel just fine about our answers. But if we don't deal with any relevant domain, we won't be able to solve the problems. So if we don't deal with the political domain, if we don't deal with the economic domain, we will not be able to get out of these problems that we're facing. What about the psychological dimension? Is there a psychological dimension? What role does selfishness play? What role does human intellectual arrogance play? What about sociological forces? What types of group thinking causes problems for the Earth and for other sentient creatures? Again, what about the historical dimension? I mentioned this earlier. How have we tended to view the Earth's resources historically? What about religious forces? Do we have religious forces standing in the way? Have we had them? What can religious institutions better do to contribute to the health of the Earth? And what about the educational dimension? What are schools doing to either help or, as it were, impede our ability to solve these problems? Where do we have ecological issues being discussed, addressed, debated, and acted upon in schools? Where are the gardens? Where are the native gardens? Where are the field trips out into nature? What are we doing in our schools to help? So you see, this is complex.